G'day mates, it's B Buster here, and I would like to give Chime a big shout out for sponsoring this episode. So, have you ever received an overdraft fee unexpectedly? I know I have, and it really feels like I was being taken advantage of. I hate how this happens when you least expect it too. Like, when you're just withdrawing some cash you expect to be in your account because you should be paid your week's wage by that point, only to find out that you haven't been paid yet, and so you've overdrawn. I've been there, and it really felt like I was scammed out of my hard-earned dollars. Well, kick off 2022 with a better checking account, with no monthly fees. Chime, an award-winning app and debit card, has no overdraft fees, foreign transaction fees, monthly fees, or service fees. With over 60,000 fee-free in-network ATMs at many locations, like most Walgreens, 7-Eleven, CVS, you can access your money when you need it, where you need it. You can also send money to anyone, even if they aren't on Chime, fee-free for you and no cash-out fees for them. Make your first good decision of the new year and join over 10 million people using Chime. Sign up only takes 2 minutes and doesn't affect your credit score. Get started at chime.com/be scared. That's chime.com/be scared. And in the spirit of transparency, just know that banking services are provided by and debit cards are issued by the Bancorp Bank or Stride Bank NA, members FDIC. Get fee-free transactions at any MoneyPass ATM in a 7-Eleven location and at any Allpoint or Visa Plus Alliance ATM. Otherwise, out-of-network ATM withdrawal fees may apply. Also, sometimes Pay Anyone instant transfers can be delayed, and the recipient must use a valid debit card or be a Chime member to claim funds. So, to preface this story, I was about 15 to 16 years old at that time. It was my best friend's birthday, and she had invited about 6 of us over to play a few games, such as Mario Party, Mario Kart, Guitar Hero, etc., and stay the night in celebration of her big 16. At this get-together, there were 5 girls, including me, and 1 boy. After a while, my best friend asked if we would like to go to the playground, which was about a 10-minute walk away from her house. And of course, being stupid teens, we agreed, not thinking about how it may be dangerous, since the majority of us were young girls and it was currently 10 p.m. Anyways, we walked down to this park and continued playing Grounders when we arrived, which, if you don't know, is a game commonly played in elementary schools. The rules are that one person is it, and the person who is it must close their eyes and try to seek the other players as they hide on the playground equipment in order to tag them. But there's a catch. If someone gets off the equipment and the person who's it calls Grounders while they're on the ground, then they're tagged. Yeah, I know, it's a pretty childish game, but it was fun. After a few rounds, we got bored and decided to huddle around in a circle in the center of the playground equipment. We were just talking, joking around, when suddenly I heard what I thought to be something like rocks. It was hitting the chain link fence that resided on the back of the playground. I sort of hushed the group. I looked over at my best friend asking if she heard that too, and as everyone looked at me like I had 10 heads, she asked what I meant, and when I told her that it sounded like somebody was throwing rocks at the fence behind us, she responded with the classical, "Ooh, it's a murderer coming to get us." Naturally, I just glared at her, flipping her off. She knows I get paranoid sometimes, but I have a very good intuition, and something just felt off. A few more minutes later, after some more rocks were thrown at the fence, and I obsessively stared down the area behind the fence, which was all woods, beside the houses on the left and the right of the playground. In paranoia, I noticed a light weaving its way through the branches of the trees. At first, I thought maybe it was just a headlight of a car that was coming down the street that connected to the street of the park, since you can vaguely sort of see the headlights of oncoming traffic through them anyway. But I soon realized that there was only one light, and it was bouncing up and down like it was being held by someone who was walking. I quickly pointed it out to the group around me as we all snapped our heads over in that direction. And coming up alongside of the nearby house on the left side of the park, was a man who wore a hat, some white baggy and dirty sweatpants, and a black coat. He was holding a flashlight, not the one on your phone, but an actual flashlight. He was too far away to guess his age, even when he sat on the swings closer to the playground equipment that we were on. But we all collectively agreed that it was strange, since he seemed, I guess from his clothes, to be at least mid-20s, and just sort of came out of the woods by himself to sit and stare at a load of kids. After a brief discussion, we agreed that maybe he was waiting for a ride or was just resting for a moment. And so we tried to brush off the fact that he was sitting and so intensely staring at us. However, we started to take note that after a few minutes of us resuming our very competitive game of grounders, that this stranger was slowly inching his way closer to our group. He went from sitting on one of the swings furthest away to the next swing a bit closer, to the equipment that we were on, to the next, until he was just about maybe 10 feet away from our game. Mind you, the whole time he just sat there, watching us. At this point, all of us have noticed the strange man attempting to get closer to us, and in an attempt to remove ourselves from a potentially dangerous situation, we made a group decision to just leave. Getting up, we all piled off the playground equipment, and in pairs of two, we walked down the stairs on the side furthest away from the creepy man. As we attempted to casually walk away, I kept my eyes glued on this figure though, and as we neared the end of the street, he got up. Slowly at first, the man started to trail behind us, keeping his distance. I decided to keep my mouth shut at the time because we were about to make a turn anyway. I thought that if he continues to follow us instead of going the other way, that I'd bring it up to the others. And wouldn't you know it, the creep stays hot on our heels, not only following which turn we took, but he also started sprinting towards us, screaming at us all amounts of expletives. At this point, the whole group burst out into a sprint. The adrenaline that I felt made me run so fast that I was ahead of everyone else. Everyone was ushering each other to run. I didn't even take a second to see if the others were behind me. That was until I heard my best friend struggling to run. She has pretty bad asthma. I instantly felt horrible for running off on her, so I ran back by her side, grabbing her hand and quite literally dragging her along, repeating things like, "Deep breaths, you've got this, come on, we have to go now." This whole time the man was still running and screaming behind us and was catching up quickly. At this point, both me and another girl in the group took it upon ourselves to get my best friend moving as fast as possible, both taking a hand and running at a pace that she could keep. Luckily, this park was only about a 10-minute walk away from my friend's house, even if that much. And as we all piled in through her garage door, I turned to see this delusional man start running up her driveway. He must have got about halfway up until our big fluffy savior ran to open the door. My friend's 100-pound, fully grown German Shepherd just lurched at the man, barking as we gripped her collar, in an attempt to keep her from running completely after this guy. Luckily, her sudden and loud appearance caused the man to freeze in fear, before he just ran away down the dark lamp-lit street. We were obviously terrified for the rest of the night, and only managed to sleep after putting random items next to us. We even had a rake, I think. But most comforting was our big fluffy hero, just in case the creep decided to come back, that was. In the end, I really think we got lucky that night. Lucky that I saw the guy. Lucky that we didn't stick around in the park longer. Lucky that we were all able to run as quickly as we did, even my friend with asthma. Lucky that the dog came out when it did. And also lucky that the guy never came back. When I was about 11 to 14 years old, I had a best friend named Spencer. Spencer had a decent-sized family, and he also had a big house. We hung out practically non-stop outside of school. He was homeschooled and I was in public school. And during the summer, I practically lived at their house. Spencer had an older brother named Keenan. Keenan was about 5 years older than him and I thought that he hung the moon pretty much. He was really cool and he listened to great music, played guitar, and I always wanted to be around him. One summer though, when I was 13, Keenan went to summer camp. He was supposed to visit the Grand Canyon and go kayaking and do a ton of fun stuff, and we were really jealous. It was weird too, not having him around all the time, since I basically stayed at the house the entire time, and finally the day came when Spencer's dad was supposed to go to the airport to pick up Keenan, and we were super stoked to hear about all the camp and stuff. His dad drove up and we ran downstairs to greet them, and yet we didn't see Keenan. His dad had tears running down his face, and he exclaimed that he didn't make it. He didn't make it, you guys. My heart dropped to my stomach, and I started to panic. Keenan walked right up behind him, and they both started laughing at this. Man, that was a terrible move on their behalf, but anyways, we helped him unload his luggage and stayed up until midnight talking about his summer. He said that he had the time of his life and told us all about how he had almost went overboard whitewater rafting and how he surely would have drowned if he did. As two 13-year-old boys, we were enamored by Keenan and everything that he did. But we talked about how Spencer and I were going to go to the same camp once we turned 18, and it had been a long day and it was time for all of us to go to bed. Keenan told us that he would tell us more in the morning when he woke up. Now, I had fallen asleep and awoken in a cold sweat because of a nightmare that I had that night. And in my dream, Spencer and I had went out our entire day that day just as we had before, except when their dad showed up and joked about Keenan dying on his trip, he actually did die. Remember, this was practically my idol at the time, and the dream was so vivid. I needed to go down and get some water just to calm myself down afterwards, and I checked my phone before I headed to the kitchen. It was 3:30 a.m. The house was really dark, and I had to tiptoe to be quiet and make sure not to wake anyone up. As I walked through the den on my way to the kitchen, I see the moonlight spilling into the living room, the only light in the house. And that's when I see what I think is a large silhouette, and as I get closer and my eyes adjust, I see Keenan hanging from the ceiling fan. I freak out and run across the room in a dead sprint and turn the light on to see if my eyes are deceiving me, but when I did, it was him. Except he was asleep and standing in the middle of the room underneath the fan now with one of his arms raised straight up over his head. I never knew Keenan to sleepwalk before, and luckily he snapped out of it before I tried to wake him up. He looked at me super confused. He looked around and noticed where he was and said, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you guys. I guess I developed a bit of a sleepwalking habit at camp." He went back to bed at that point, but I'll never forget that night. I mean, how the heck was he hanging on that thing without it breaking down from the roof? And more importantly, how did he get up there in the first place? So for context, I'm a 22-year-old male and I live in a large city in the Midwest. Now, I drive for Lyft while putting myself through trade school. I drive for other similar companies, but that's beside the point. I have many other stories from them as well, but this is the one that I would like to share. So, it was Christmas Eve 2020. I was out running Lyft for a few hours before heading to my mum's with my new baby and wife. Nothing special going on for the night, really, just the usual pretty much. I get a ride request. It was a pickup from this kind of lower income apartment complex. No big deal. I arrive and I find my passenger. He has all of his belongings, several boxes of stuff in fact. My car is a 2006 Chevy Impala, so it's not too big, but we managed to get all of his stuff loaded up, just barely, and we're on our way. During the ride, he's crying, saying that his girlfriend was cheating on him and had walked in on them earlier that night. He couldn't stay there because it was her name on the lease, so I was taking him to a hotel apparently. Now, in my city, we have a street that is well known for having vices, hookers, drugs, gangs, weapons, and just shady motels, the works. We get to the motel and he asks me to wait for him to check in and get his key. No problem, man, I say. I'll confess, though, that I break the rules a little when it comes to Lyft. But I do have a gun hidden in a concealed holster secured to the underside of my driver's seat for protection. Reason being, driving Lyft and other contract apps, I've had knives and guns pulled on me, as well as people have tried to fight me, rob me, and all kinds of other things, but like I said, another time. This motel was on that street that I mentioned before, though. Homeless people were everywhere. There was a dude on the far corner of the complex that still had a needle in his arm, passed out against the building, and I'm a big fan of true crime and all, and horror narration, so I'm definitely on edge. He gets his key though, and the whole motel is ground level, so to help this guy out, I drive to his door. As I mentioned before, he had a lot of stuff too, so I started to help him unload his stuff. While on my second trip getting all that, I saw a guy come out of the room just to the south of my car, followed by two ladies. They came up to the room that I was next to, not my passenger. One of the ladies pounded on the door and then opened it. That's when I saw this guy raise a shotgun up out of his long coat and storm into the room. The two ladies followed him, slamming the door behind them, and in the following I heard a lot of yelling and shouting. I was just waiting for shots to ring out, when out of nowhere my passenger came up behind me. I can take this, man. Go ahead and take off. Have a Merry Christmas. And he gave me a cash tip. I didn't even notice that he took the boxes out of my hands or slid a $5 bill in my pocket because I was just completely frozen, to be honest. I knew that they may have been going down into that room, but I had to leave or at least get to where I could get my gun. I know the guy and both the ladies saw me, and I know that they knew that I saw the gun. I had to get out of there, though. You know, no witnesses and all that. So I got in my car and I just sped away quickly. I got a block or so away, I think, and then I sat down for a second and just called the cops. I gave them every detail that I could, and after I got off the phone with the police, I signed out of Lyft. I didn't have much money, but I was done. I got a call later that night. The cops apparently investigated. They never found the gunman or the women, and they never answered the door that I saw them come out of. And the occupants of the room they went into said that nothing had happened and that I was just making everything up. Well, I know what I saw.